Hi, in this video I would like to explain the domain and range of different functions. Functions are the tools for describing the real world in mathematical terms. A function can be represented by an equation, a graph, a numerical table, or a verbal description. There is a function, suppose there is a function, it may be a task, a mission, a device, okay, which performs some function. It requires the some inputs. By taking the some set of inputs, it apply that function, then we will get the some set of outputs. That set of inputs is called as domain, and the set of outputs are called as range. A function relates each input to exactly one output, and it can be represented as the function of x equal to y, that is a y equal to f of x. The domain is the set of all possible input values, and range is the set of all possible output values. If you get confusion that domain is whether the domain is set of all possible input values or set of all possible output values are called as range, if you get that confusion, you can remember that easily that d comes earlier than the r in alphabets. That is the input, first we give the inputs, so that set of all possible inputs are called inputs, set of all possible input values is called as domain, and the set of all possible output values is called as range. While writing the domain and range or a function, there is a some there are some rules. Those are that domain is often restricted by division by 0, that denominator should not be a 0. If denominator is a 0, that will be a undefined function, so always that function should be a defined. And that is that function, that inputs are real numbers and outputs are also should be a real number. So when there is a if there is a function 1 by x, that x should not be a 0, or that denominator term, whatever the term in the denominator, that equivalent value of that denominator should not be equal to 0. If it is a 0, that 1 by 0 is undefined function. So that domain is restricted by the division by 0, even root of a negative number. If the term in under square root of the value is the negative number, that will be a square root of negative number will be a complex number, imaginary term, and that should be a real number. So even root of a negative number is not allowed as the domain for the input values. Similarly, that logarithm of non-positive number, the restrictions of the domain are set of input values on division by 0, that is denominator should not be a 0, even root of a negative number, logarithm of non-positive number. Now let us see the domain and range of the different functions. Suppose if that function y equal to x square, then the domain, that a set of all possible input values may be any real value, any real number, that is from minus infinity to infinity, so that domain is minus infinity to infinity. This function is a x square. For even that x is a negative number, that y will be a positive number, so that range will be a positive numbers, all positive numbers including 0. That range is 0 to infinity including 0. So we have to write this closed bracket, that is a square bracket, that is includes the 0, because when x equal to 0, that y will be 0. If x is a negative number, even if it is a negative number or positive number, that y will be a positive real number. So that y range set of all possible outputs are from 0 to including 0 to infinity. plus infinity, positive values. And the domain is the any value. It may be a negative value or positive value. That negative value or positive value that function gives the real value. So the domain is minus infinity to infinity. You have to write this type of brackets, the parenthesis, that is the open brackets, that is minus infinity to infinity. That range is the 0 to including 0 to infinity. That we have to write the square bracket only. If you write this type of bracket, that is not allowed by the, that means if you put this round bracket, then that is the excluding the value. Here this function includes the 0, so we have to write to only that square bracket or closed bracket on the left side. The square of any real number is a positive number, so that range is 0 to infinity, including 0. Suppose that function y equal to 1 by x. Then what is the domain? That x may be any real value except 0. That excluding the 0 value. So that domain is minus infinity to 0, excluding 0. So we have to write this. Here we have to put this open bracket and union 0 to infinity. That is the excluding the 0 all real values. You can also be write this domain as the set of all real values minus excluding that 0. Okay, that is the domain. Range is also the same, that is the excluding 0, that y values. Okay, when that x excludes the 0, when x is not equal to 0, and remaining all real values that we get, then we get the output is the all real values except the 0. That is the range is minus infinity to 0 union 0 to infinity, that excludes the this 0. Okay, if it is the 0, that will be undefined function. Next, if you take the function is the y is equal to root x. The term, the equivalent value under the square root should not be equal to negative value. So that x should be greater than or equal to 0. That x will be this x will be greater than or equal to 0. That is the all positive. It allows the all positive values including 0. That then domain is 0 to infinity including 0. So we have to put this closed bracket, that is the square bracket. That is the range. Domain is the 0 to infinity. Range is also 0 to infinity. When it is it allows that set of all possible input values from 0 to infinity. That output is also from 0 to infinity. That set of all possible output values, that 0 to infinity including 0. That is the range of the y function y equal to root x. The square root function is defined only for non-negative inputs. Next, if the function is y equal to square root of 4 minus x. Similarly, in the previous example, that term under the square root is greater than or equal to 0. That is, here this 4 minus x should be greater than or equal to 0. Means that is the 4 greater than or equal to x. That is x less than or equal to 4. So that range that may be any negative number x less than 4, that x may be any negative number less than 4. If it is x equal to 4, then this term will be 0. Then square root of 0 equal to 0, that is allowed by that function. So the domain is minus infinity to 4, that less than 4 is allowed, that negative number. If it is any negative number, then suppose it is the minus 5, 4 minus of minus 5, that will be a positive number. So that will be a real value. So the domain is minus infinity to 4, that including 4. The domain is a minus infinity to 4 and range is the 0 to infinity. Okay, including 0, that limits the 0, that should not be a negative number. Okay, that y, that under the square root, the term will be that range is the 0 to infinity. That we get the y equal to 0 when x is the 4, that is that x allows the x less than or equal to 4. So the domain is minus infinity to 4 including 4. Here the range is 0 to infinity, that is includes the 0. If the function y equal to square root of 1 minus x square, here our condition is, our restriction is that the term under the square root should be a positive number. So that is the 1 minus x square should be greater than or equal to 0. That is 1 greater than or equal to x square. That is x square less than or equal to 1. So that x is in between the minus 1 to 1. Then that range is 0 to 1. That includes the minus 1 and 1. So the domain is the minus 1 to 1. We have to put this closed brackets or square brackets. Range is the 0 to 1. These are the functions we have discussed in this video, that is y equal to x square. That x can be any real value, that is minus infinity to infinity, and for the negative values of the x, that x square, that y will be positive value. So that is range is from 0 to infinity. How to put the including 0, that is the square bracket. Y equal to 1 by x, that x will not be 0. So excluding 0, that domain is the minus infinity to 0 union 0 to infinity. That here we put this open bracket, that excludes the 0. That range is also minus infinity to 0 union 0 to infinity. That is the, we can say that is the that real values, all set of all real values minus 0. This we can write as that real values minus of 0. Here all set of all real values, that is the on, and this is also set of this y equal to x square, that is a set of all real values. This is the set of all real values excluding this 0, and y equal to root x, that root x, that term under the square root should not be a negative number. So that is a 0 to infinity. The domain is the 0 to infinity including 0, and that range is also 0 to infinity including 0. That y equal to square root of 4 minus x, that 4 minus x should be greater than or equal to 0. So the domain we got that minus infinity to 4. Range is the 0 to infinity. Y equal to square root of 1 minus x square. The domain is the minus 1 to 1 and range is the 0 to 1. In my next video, I will try to upload the solutions of these functions, that is f of x equal to square root of 5x plus 10. The term, the equivalent value under the square root should be greater than or equal to 0. And by solving this equation, we get that domain and range. Similarly, that other functions, that if of x equal to 5 minus 2x, this is the, we get the domain is the domain and range is the all real values. Here f of x equal to square root of 1 by mod x, so that x can be any value, negative value, even negative value, that mod negative value, modulus of this negative value will be a positive value, so that x can be any real value. The domain can be any real value, set of all real values. And the y range, that range will be only positive values. Okay, even for the negative values of the x we get the positive values, so that range will be 0 to including 0, 0 to infinity, and the domain is the minus infinity to infinity. Here also f of x equal to 1 by modulus of x. This denominator should not be equal to 0. So except 0, that can be any number, any real value, negative number or positive number. So that is the domain is minus infinity to infinity excluding 0. Similarly, range is also. Okay, let us revise all the points. That domain is the all allowable, all possible input values. Set of all possible input values is called domain. Set of all possible input values, output values is called as the range. That domain restrictions are division by 0. That division denominator should not be equal to 0. Square roots of negative number, logarithms of negative number. These are not allowed by the input values of the any function, any real function. Thank you for watching.